I am Ilger. At today's introduction to 10 American classic, let's talk about The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel Hawthorne was born in Salem, Massachusetts in 1804, died in 1864. He attended Bowdoin College in Maine, where he became friends with Franklin Pierce, who later became the 14th President of the United States. After college, Hawthorne returned to his hometown Salem and began writing short stories that included Twice Told Tales, The Minister's Black Veil, and Young Goodman Brown. He later wrote a number of novels including The Scarlet Letter, The House of the Seven Gables, The Blithedale Romance, and The Marble Fawn. The Scarlet Letter was published in 1850. The story is set in Puritan New England in the 17th century. The novel opens with a young woman named Hester Prynne holding her infant daughter Pearl on a scaffold in front of the town's Puritan community. The town folks are upset because Hester has given birth to the baby of unknown paternity. Many women in the crowd are angered by her beauty and quiet dignity. No matter how people demand, Hester refuses to reveal the name of her child's father. Therefore, she is punished with public humiliation and banishment from the community. Her sentence requires her to stand on the scaffold for 3 hours, and she is forced to wear the scarlet letter, A, on her chest for the rest of her life as a symbol of her adultery and a constant reminder of her sin, described as follows. On the breast of her gown, in fine red cloth, surrounded with an elaborate embroidery and fantastic flourishes of gold thread, appeared the letter A. It was so artistically done, and with so much fertility and gorgeous luxuriance of fancy, that it had all the effect of a last and fitting decoration to the apparel which she wore, and which was of a splendor in accordance with the taste of the age, but greatly beyond what was allowed by the sumptuary regulations of the colony. Chapter 2. As Hester looks out over the crowd, she notices a small, misshapen man and recognizes him as her long-lost husband Chillingworth, who had been presumed lost at sea. When Chillingworth sees Hester's shame, he asks a man in the crowd and is told the story of his wife's pregnancy. He angrily exclaims that the child's father should also be punished for his immoral act. Chillingworth is consumed with a desire for revenge against the man who committed adultery with his wife. Despite the harsh treatment Hester receives from the townspeople, she remains dignified and strong. She becomes a skilled seamstress and supports herself and her daughter by her needlework of extraordinary quality. The Reverend John Wilson and Arthur Dimmesdale, who is a young and well-respected minister from Hester's church, question her, but she refuses to name the father of her child. After she returns to her prison cell, the jailer brings in Chillingworth, who is now a physician, and who is expected to calm Hester and her child with some roots and herbs. He and Hester have an open conversation regarding their marriage and the fact that they were both in the wrong. Chillingworth demands to know who fathered Hester's child, but Hester refuses to reveal it. He is determined to find out the man's identity and also threatens to destroy this man if Hester ever reveals the fact that Chillingworth is her husband. Hester agrees to his terms. Following her release from the prison, Hester settles in a cottage at the edge of town, living a quiet, somber life with her daughter, and performs acts of charity for the poor. Pearl has no chance to make any friends or have any playmates except her mother. As she grows older, Pearl becomes capricious and unruly. Her behaviors get some attention from the townspeople and trigger rumors. They suggest Pearl be taken away from her mother Hester because of her bad influence. Realizing that she may lose her daughter, Hester speaks to Governor Bellingham and Ministers Wilson and Dimmesdale. She appeals to Dimmesdale in desperation, and the minister persuades the governor to let Pearl remain in Hester's care. Minister Dimmesdale's health has begun to fail, and the townspeople are happy to have Chillingworth, the newly arrived physician, to take care of their beloved minister. In close contact with Dimmesdale, Chillingworth begins to suspect that the minister's illness is the result of unconfessed guilt. He applies psychological pressure to the minister because he suspects Dimmesdale is Pearl's father. One evening, pulling the sleeping Dimmesdale's vestment aside, Chillingworth sees a symbol that represents his shame on the minister's pale chest. The father of Pearl is eventually revealed to be Minister Arthur Dimmesdale, who is racked with guilt over his sin. He is tormented by the hypocrisy of the Puritan community, which preaches forgiveness and mercy but punishes sinners with harshness and cruelty. As Hester and Dimmesdale struggle with their guilt and their feelings for each other, Chillingworth becomes increasingly obsessed with revenge, and the novel builds towards a dramatic climax. Dimmesdale goes to the square where Hester was punished. Climbing the scaffold in the night, he admits his guilt but cannot find the courage to do so publicly in the daylight. Hester, shocked by Dimmesdale's deterioration, decides to obtain a release from her vow of silence to her husband. Hester meets Dimmesdale in the forest and tells him of her husband and his desire for revenge. She convinces Dimmesdale to leave Boston in secret on a ship to Europe where they can start a new life. Inspired by this plan, the minister seems to gain energy. On election day, Dimmesdale gives one of his most inspired sermons. As the procession leaves the church, Dimmesdale climbs upon the scaffold, confesses his sin, and dies in Hester's arms. Most witnesses swear that they saw a stigma in the form of a scarlet A upon his chest. Chillingworth loses his vengeance and dies as well, leaving Pearl a substantial inheritance. Years later, Hester returns to her cottage and resumes wearing the Scarlet Letter. When she dies, she is buried near the grave of Dimmesdale. The Scarlet Letter is a complex and nuanced exploration of morality, hypocrisy, and the human condition. It examines the relationship between public shame and private guilt, and raises questions about the nature of sin and the possibility of redemption. The novel is notable for its richly drawn characters, vivid descriptions of Puritan society, and evocative use of symbolism, such as the Scarlet Letter itself and the dark forest where Hester and Dimmesdale meet in secret. The following examples are from the novel. The Scarlet Letter was her passport into regions where other women dared not tread. Shame, despair, solitude. These had been her teachers, stern and wild ones, and they had made her strong, but taught her much amiss. Chapter 5. The fire on the hearth had died down, and only the glow of the late March afternoon filled the room, casting a warm yellow light on the walls and furniture, and sending long shadows across the floor. Chapter 17. Thus, Hester Prynne, whose heart had lost its regular and healthy throb, wandered without a clue in the dark labyrinth of mind, now turned aside by an insurmountable precipice, now starting back from a deep chasm. Chapter 16. The central theme of the novel is the destructive effects of sin on the individual and society. Hester's sin not only affects her but also has a ripple effect on the entire community, including her daughter Pearl. While Hawthorne examines the nature of sin and its consequences, he also delves into the idea of redemption and the possibility of finding forgiveness and peace. The novel also presents the hypocrisy of the Puritan society. The Puritans are portrayed as being highly judgmental and intolerant of sin, yet they themselves are guilty of many sins, including hypocrisy, cruelty, and intolerance. While The Scarlet Letter is widely regarded as a classic of American literature, it is not without its controversies, and its treatment of gender, race, religion, and other issues has been the subject of debate and criticism over the years. Some critics have argued that the novel is misogynistic in its portrayal of Hester Prynne. Others have criticized the novel's heavy use of symbolism, arguing that it can be overwhelming and detract from the story's emotional impact. There have been several movie adaptations of The Scarlet Letter over the years, but none of them have achieved the level of popularity or cultural impact as some of the highest-grossing movies of all time. The Scarlet Letter, the 1995 version starring Demi Moore and Gary Oldman, directed by Roland Joffe, is perhaps the most well-known and widely watched. However, it received mixed reviews from critics and audiences, and it did not perform particularly well at the box office. Overall, The Scarlet Letter is a complex and multi-layered novel that explores the darker aspects of human nature and the consequences of our actions, as commented by some reviewers. The Scarlet Letter is a classic work of American literature that explores the complexities of human nature and the consequences of sin. Hawthorne's writing is powerful, evocative, and deeply moving. The New York Times. The Scarlet Letter is a masterpiece of psychological insight and moral complexity. Hawthorne's exploration of sin, guilt, and redemption is both timeless and universal, making this novel a true classic of American literature. The Guardian.